rife with uncertainty and shock, and nobody actually knew what the future would bring. And what he said then, it's Zeitenwende, he said that 24th of February 22 marks a watershed in the history of our continent. And he said that Putin not only seeking to wipe out a country, he's demolishing the European security order that had been in place for close to 50 years since the Helsinki Final Accords. Now we know that long-term security cannot be achieved without Russia. He said that in his speech, but in the foreseeable future, Putin is jeopardizing the security, and he's actually nobody you can sit down with to negotiate. Now, what he proposed are 5 courses of action. One is the unwavering support of Ukraine, because they were attacked, they were the victims in this, and they were now actually fighting for our values. They were standing in for us because everybody knows that Putin will not stop with Ukraine if he's having his way in that country. The second is that we would be unwavering in forcing sanctions on Russia, which sounds easy right now, but I'll come later to it. It's not that easy, especially for Germany. The third is preventing Putin's war from spilling over, and this is one of the things that he was always very careful also with the sanctions and with the kind of weapons we were providing to Ukraine, because he was always afraid that this might spill into a war between NATO and Russia. This is why we and also the US, they were very adamant. All this talk about creating a no-fly zone in Ukraine in the first 2 or 3 weeks, this was something that nobody really tried to push, because we knew exactly that if you declare a no-fly zone, that means that you have to shoot down Russian jets. And NATO has to shoot down Russian jets, and this would have been an open war between NATO and Russia, and nobody actually wanted to do that. What he said then, and this was really, really a watershed, is that he would have a major investment in our security budget. Alone in 2022, he said, that we would set aside $100 billion for necessary investment and for armaments. And this is one of the things that you might remember that this was always an issue of the Americans. This was not just former President Trump who pushed it a little harder and undiplomatically even others, but this was something that President Bush said, this was something that President Obama said, and this is definitely something that also President Biden is now trying to assure, that we are paying our fair share of NATO costs. And this is already in 2015, 2016, it was said that by 2024, we would actually pay about 2% of our budget, of our general gross product into NATO. And we're doing this now. And the other the fifth course, of course, is to strive to guarantee a secure energy supply. Now, what we are facing is we had 55% of our gas energy coming from Russia, and we are bringing this number down. Now, he ended the speech calling for as much diplomacy as possible is something that you have to do without being naive. And 3 days after the aggression, I think this was fairly remarkable. I mean, we are not newcomers to crisis. In 2008, we had the financial crisis, where our Chancellor Merkel had to appear with our finance minister at that time to guarantee to Germans that their savings were secure, and said, we guarantee you your savings, because there was a run on banks, or they were afraid there would be a run on banks. And we had to sort of fall out of the financial crisis at that time. 2015, you may remember that we took in, within 4 or 5 months, 900,000 refugees from the Middle East, from Iraq, from Syria, especially Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan also. This was quite something. And 2020, of course, everybody was hit by COVID. So this again was a huge, huge crisis. And now we have what now is called the watershed. The others were things that we can do, we can somehow manage, and now we are at the watershed. And this came, at least for Germans, as quite a surprise. I always said, this is like we were sleeping, like the Sleeping Beauty. We were lying there, sleeping, and unfortunately the prince who kissed us awake was Putin. And that was quite a abrupt awakening. We had dreamt after the fall of the wall and the end of the Soviet Union that we would have no war and no strife, nothing at all. We said Wandel durch Handel, so change through trade. So we would have to have closer economic ties with Russia, for instance, and that would automatically bind them. And even in 1997, there was the signing of the NATO-Russia Founding Act, something that people simply didn't see or didn't want to see what was happening in Russia. We had, when Putin came to power, 1999, immediately there was this really harsh war in Chechnya. He leveled Grozny, a big, huge city, he leveled it to the ground. And in 2001, nevertheless, he gave a speech in the Bundestag, and he was applauded. He got a standing ovation, because he just said, so we're going to work together, and there will be cooperation from now on. Well, the facts on the ground were totally different, but obviously we didn't want to see that. And then even in 2007, he gave a speech at the Munich Security Conference, and he was fairly open. That he said, that he wasn't done yet. He wanted to revive the former glorious Soviet Union, and still there's just words, and actually, that he's coming around. This also led to the complacency, and I must say, I was also one of those. Nord Stream 2, huge discussion for years and years. Should we get more gas from Russia? And I remember in my time when there was already the discussion, and a couple of years ago, there were some Republican senators who wrote like blackmail letters to people, to the mayor of a small town in East Germany where the pipeline should go on shore. And we just said, this is just, they want to sell more liquefied natural gas. And of course, they are not. Ted Cruz, is he opposed to something Putin does, or is he afraid that we might be more dependent on Putin? Certainly not. He wanted to sell the gas, but now, as I said, this was a rude awakening, and even like our president, who was a foreign minister at the time, who always tried to have good relations with Russia, he was absolutely wrong. The government was absolutely wrong. And this all now comes also at a time when the world by itself has dramatically changed. We have authoritarianism on both sides of the Atlantic. We have Hungary, Poland, now Italy. So as before, there should be a very, very interesting meeting with the new Italian ambassador here, what she has to say about the new government in Rome that was just voted into power 2 weeks ago. We had Trump here, we had Bolsonaro, perhaps hopefully had Bolsonaro in Brazil, but there will be a runoff election also end of October. Let's see what happens. But in any case, with all this trend towards right-wing extremism, nationalism, thinking that your country is first, nobody expected a war in Europe. I remember just 2 weeks ago, I took my group of Latin American and Caribbean diplomats to the battlefields of Flanders. So we had 2 days in Brussels and visiting EU, visiting the NATO. But I wanted to show them also where we came from. Because this is the first time we did this 3 years ago. This was shortly after Brexit. And with Hungary, with Poland, with others, trying to weaken the European Union, And I wanted to show them, what we had actually achieved and what only 100 years before happened. And this is a very, very interesting visit to see the battlefields and the trenches in Ypern. And well, 3 years ago, little did I know that we would have trenches and destruction and that right in Europe again. So this is something that we have to deal with now. Talking about nationalism here in the US, there was a sigh of relief. I can't say anything else but that. There was a sigh of relief when President Biden was elected and he said, America's back. But when you talk to diplomats in Europe, the direction is, yes, it's absolutely great, but will they stay? Nobody knows what's going to happen, not in the midterms now, not in 2024. So we have to see what's happening, because that would definitely endanger NATO. We would never ever have a reaction that we had without the President Biden in the Foreign Office. He did a great job bringing NATO members together and bring them in line to support Ukraine. Now, Mrs. Baerbock, our new foreign minister since last December, she's doing an absolutely great job, and I think we didn't have a foreign minister since the foundation of the Federal Republic that assumed her position, she's the first anyway, as a woman, but the first time to assume a position in such difficult times. She's doing a great job there. And she gave a speech at the New School in New York a couple of weeks ago, and she said that, there were key moments for Europe, for transatlantic relations, and there was the Western integration of Germany after the war. It was the end of the Cold War, but now we have to seize this transatlantic moment. And she named 3 pillars, which actually all of them are intertwined. There's the security, the 100 billion euros that Minister Scholz mentioned in his Zeitenwende speech. There was the expansion of Sweden and Finland, who joined NATO. And we Germans, we are leading a NATO battle group now in Lithuania, and we are providing soldiers who go up to the Baltics and have at least a show of presence there, and then show Putin that he can't mess with the Baltic states without really messing with NATO. And we have a national security strategy, which is developed right now. I think we should have that at the beginning of next year. And this national security strategy, she says, it's not just tanks and jets. What we are looking for is now growing the disinformation and social media. We have supply chain issues, and we have the climate crisis. And part of the security, of course, is also lessening our dependence on energy. And as I mentioned before, our gas imports from Russia were 55% of our consumption, and this is down now to 26%.